Okay guys, thank you for coming to GCC's first ever roundtable discussion event. Yeah. So basically what's going to go down is I'm no expert in Chinese politics, I'm just fascinated by it. So what I'm basically going to give for you mostly in the presentation is, most of the info is going to be referenced from this book, which is called Governing China. It's from Kenneth Lieberthal. It's an amazing book, like 117 pages of it. He just writes so concisely and just knows the system inside and out. It's phenomenal. The problem is, it was published in 2003, so there's obviously like a lot of gap there. But most of the stuff is just going to be like straight up, like facts, like actual stuff from here, from that, unless if it's from this video, which is China's Century Revolution, and I'll let you know when that starts off. So I was debating, like, okay, when do I start this? And yeah, man. I was like, when do I start? Where in the story do I start? Like, what succession in Chinese politics? And to understand what it is today, which is what I really want you guys to do, I just want you to understand, like, the leader's mindset, like what kind of atmosphere they're in. And you really need to start off with the Cultural Revolution. And the first reason that Lieberthal says was the reason for the Cultural Revolution was to actually change the successor. At first it was Liu Xiaoqi. Like, since from 1945, like, he was the guy. Everyone like knew him, they liked him. Like, to have him removed, to not be the successor, you would need like a pretty big movement, which was why he started this. Other reasons, to discipline the huge bureaucracies governing the country. He just really wasn't happy with what he was seeing, so he wanted that to change. He wanted to expose China's youth to revolutionary experience, and he wanted to make substantive policy changes, like to reduce urban-rural differences. You know, you can predict that, but also to eliminate university entrance exams. And what Lieberthal says is, like, nothing inherent about the system at the time would have led to the Cultural Revolution. Like, this is Mao's doing. Like, this Cultural Revolution was entirely Mao. And the person he wanted to change succession to was a man named by Lin Biao. He was essentially a military man, brilliant military strategist, like pre-1949. They wanted to get him in there. All these pictures I got from Wikimedia, Wiki Commons, by the way, except otherwise stated. You know, here you can see him like during the revolution, like two guys together. I'm not sure what that says, but something probably interesting. And what ended up happening was, from like 66 to 69, like a lot of stuff was going down, and then there was changes made after 69, and like people were starting to get rehabbed. So what happened was, he actually attempted an assassination attempt on Mao, failed, took him and his family, tried to fly to the Soviet Union apparently, but they crashed in Inner Mongolia, and it was like flames, apparently their bodies were incarcerated, whatever. So now Mao was still left with the succession issue. And in 1972 he had a heart attack, and in 1972 Zhou Enlai also learns that he has cancer. Zhou Enlai was the premier at the time. He was actually running the country. Like, where Mao was more of the idea man, Zhou Enlai was more of the, okay, let's actually do this. And most Chinese, if you talk to them, speak highly of Zhou Enlai. They don't like him. Maybe partially because he was never purged, and second, just because he was just that accompanying part with Mao. So 73 onwards, it started to heat up. Zhou starts to rehabilitate some foreign officials. Also Deng Xiaoping, who was sort of cast aside in the purges, he was coming back. He was recruited by Zhou Enlai. And then wife, of course, Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, was like getting this radical group together. And as far as where they each had their power, the moderates, so like Deng Xiaoping, like Zhou Enlai, like they had like actually the executive organs, where the radicals, they were mostly like propaganda and culture apparatus. And Mao never interfered between the two. He was always just kind of like swaying things back and forth, and they each went through periods of power. And it was really a question of who was going to die first. Was Mao going to die first, or was Zhou Enlai going to die first? And that was key. And what ended up happening is Zhou Enlai, unfortunately, was the first to die. died in 1976 in January. And almost immediately, Deng was removed from power in April. And then, you know, like Jiang, like Mao's wife, they're all like, all right, they're gone, you know, they're gonna, like, they're reinstituting like their policy changes. But the population was so sick of it at the time. Like the fact that like, it's like, oh, okay, Liu Shaoqi's gone, and they're bringing in Lin Biao, they're hyping up Lin Biao, and then Lin Biao is suddenly now like an enemy. Like they just said like, oh, it was just a big hoax. Like Mao knew Lin Biao was always an enemy, and they just did that whole thing to expose him. Like the population just wasn't buying it. They were so tired, and Mao eventually finally dies September 9th. Finally, 1976, Mao dies, and the next month, Jiang and like the other Gang of Four, they're arrested. Who's in power now? Who's arresting them? Well, it's like this guy. His name's Huo Guofeng, and like just hearing people talk about him, some of the videos I watch, like, oh yeah, you know, he really tried to be like Mao. He kind of looks like him too. You know, he would walk around like waving his hand. Like he kind of came to power because of the Cultural Revolution, so he always backed that. You know, he's just like, oh, you know, like we'll kind of continue on and whatnot. And the other leaders kind of like initially rallied behind him just to get rid of the Gang of Four. But once the Gang of Four was gone, there's kind of like, all right, some like quick questions. But just getting back to the fact that Mao dies. Like, what kind of system were they left with? Let's just take it back for a second. Mao basically said part of the problem was within the party itself. So the party was facing a huge like legitimacy crisis. Like the younger people were basically told to go against like the older officials and kind of weed them out. So that resulted in vicious infighting and like just a decline in overall the functioning and capabilities of the government itself. Declined seriously. Like Mao, he defined the prevailing line, so he straight up undermined any normal paths to making policy and settling disagreements. Like everything was kind of just, there was no set standard anymore. And there was extremely low information systems, especially since like the party and government were afraid of being purged. So this amazing quote, which I love: attack on institutions from 1966 to 69, threw the top leaders back on their personal resources and networks in the increasingly deadly game of Chinese power politics. So I feel like how it is today kind of originally originated like that, like just the stress on personnel and just you need the people. Like that sort of started with between 66, 69 with Mao. So there's some quick questions like, yo, Mao, like what are they gonna do? First one was like, how do we repair the political system? Do we rehabilitate Deng again for the second time? What about the grievances of tens of millions of people? And how do we regard Mao and the Cultural Revolution? So, question of bring back to Deng, like, Hua obviously had the most to lose, because he was just like, oh, it was one of his last acts to get rid of Deng, so we should not have him gone. But he was really strongly advocated to return by the other leaders, specifically Chen Yun and Wang Zhen. Chen Yun is like featured in both of these pictures. He was like an old school revolutionary, just like Deng Xiaoping. He was unique among all the old school guys, the fact that he was from Shanghai. He was a bit more of an urbanite guy, and he was left to kind of run the economy. And he was just like, man, we want Deng Xiaoping back. Look, we want to get through reforms. You know, we don't want more of this like Hua Guofeng and like extension of Cultural Revolution stuff. So who is Deng Xiaoping? He's from Sichuan, inland. He studied in France. Here's a picture of him. He was like 16. And apparently, once he was out there, it really kind of opened his mind. Like, to be able to be in China at that time, he was studying France is pretty incredible. And apparently he worked at like a factory and he first saw like what capitalism was like and stuff. And apparently also he never really totally like was super down with the communists. He was just like, this is the best option, so that's kind of why I joined, apparently. That's not from Lieberthal, though, just kind of right now. He was actually in Beijing on October 1st for the proclamation. But immediately after that, he was sent down to the southwest to actually lead the army to fully take the southwest, because there's still some of the Kuomintang there and whatnot. So he was also like a great military guy too. And in 1956, he was head of the party secretariat, which is basically like the White House. So it's just like carrying out the day-to-day tasks of the top leaders. He was the head of that. He was the head of the organizational department, which is responsible for assigning all of the party members their various posts. So with those two positions alone, he had access to the most people easily, hands down, and he was also vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. So I get back to that quote that people had to rely on their personal networks. At the time, Deng Xiaoping, hands down, had the largest. He was first purged in 1966. That happened quite immediately after the Cultural Revolution. He was definitely a target. He was once rehabbed in 73. He really pushed reform. He's like, screw the Cultural Revolution, let's move on, let's move on, let's move on. But remember, once Zhou Enlai died, he was purged for the second time. His competence, political stature was just unrivaled. He was just so keen and just so blunt. So eventually, Hua gave away. Zhang wrote a letter to the Central Committee. It's like, sure, whatever, Hua, you can be the leader. Just bring me back. And then he was restated to those three positions. That's the other thing with Deng. He never really moved against other people. People didn't dislike him that much. He was just very well liked, which is pretty nice.